Hello and welcome to this episode of the Glasgow Business Game Plan. And today we are speaking with Calum Russell of MVPs. Calum, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Now, this podcast is called the Glasgow Business Game Plan, and I believe that you're coming to us from a little town in the southeast of Glasgow. Is that right?
Yeah. Little town, Bangkok. Just
Oh, yeah.
southeast. Shawlands was kind of where I was based before, so an East
Brilliant.
Coast guy that spent time in Glasgow and is now working remotely from around the world.
Sounds brilliant. So tell us a bit more about what you do and what allows you to work remotely around the world.
Yeah, so I founded a tech startup which is targeting the US college sports market. Now, anyone that kind of follows American sports, they'll be aware that traditionally, student athletes in America have not been paid. However, recently, as recent of 2021, they passed legislation allowing them to monetize their name, image, and likeness. So that's really where our business is focused. And as I say, it's all online. So I'm able to work anywhere around the world. Currently, where I am, I'm 12 hours ahead of Central Time in the USA, so the time zones work pretty well for me.
Amazing. So, how did you get into this? Where did the inspiration come from? Because it's not a typical route of somebody from our part of the world anyway.
Yes, I mean, I kind of recognised that there was an issue across all sports, whereas the amateur and semi-professional level, just where the current business models are very inefficient at distributing capital in a way that is able to sufficiently support aspiring athletes. So these athletes are trying to make it professional, therefore they have to train just as much as professional athletes. However, they have to then hold down a 9 to 5 because they obviously need money just to support themselves. And when the clubs tend to try and do this, they either end up going bankrupt or breaking some laws around, kind of salary caps or so on. But in the NCAA and American college sports, the reason they didn't do it was just out of greed, and they used this kind of guise of amateurism, the values of amateurism, to justify not paying the athletes. But eventually people kind of woke up to that, and legal action forced their arm to stop paying them. But yeah, so I kind of came up with the concept, realized there's lots of potential applications. Then it was a case of where do you start? So for me, it was either cricket in India, particularly women's cricket in India, which has taken off, and college sports in the USA. And really what made me go for college sports was the timing of it, as I said, about the legislation being passed. It was also a bit more familiar to me because I've always really admired the college sports system over there, apart from the fact that they don't pay their athletes, of course.
Really interesting. So, tell us a bit more then. How does MVPs support the athletes, and how else does it interact with them?
Yeah, so essentially what we're doing is we're creating a platform which connects the athletes with their fan base. Now, all kind of wealth within sports is generated from essentially capturing the attention of the fans or selling them merchandise. So we are no different. The only thing that we do is we cut out the middleman or replace them, I suppose. Our operational costs come are a lot less, so we can pass on more of the profits to the athletes. Now, what we essentially do is we, innovate fairly well-known products. So things like apparel, things like collectibles, using like the latest technology. We sell them and we enable the athletes to drive demand for those by interacting with their fans. Because athletes are essentially, in this day and age, social influencers. Just what makes them relevant isn't so much the content they're producing, but rather it's their performance on the field. So they have like a far higher engagement rate on social media compared to their peers just because they play sport. We really help them to understand the value of their brand, and then we give them the resources and tools to help monetize that.
Brilliant. So you've really recognised an opportunity there and utilising obviously technology to help bring that to life. So what do you think is the biggest challenge with the business that you have at the moment?
So I think the biggest challenge, I mean, probably funding, just because it is such a massive undertaking. With any of these kind of tech startups, you can get started for relatively, not not a whole lot of capital compared to like a brick and mortar type business. You think about the expenditure of starting up a cafe or something. But then if you want to scale it up, you've got to get some big backers on board. And that really requires you having a substantial network of probably high net worth individuals. And, you know, market sentiment is huge. So you're very kind of vulnerable. Like timing is so important with these things. You're very vulnerable to the volatility of market sentiment. So that's really, and I tend to explain it to a lot of people where I work with a lot of people in the USA, entrepreneurs from, you know, I talk with people from the Silicon Valley and so on. And the amount of times I've had people say to me, I'll just raise 100,000 from family and friends. I'm thinking like, you've never met my family and friends. You know, it's not that easy. So yeah, that's definitely a challenge. Just you know, having to go a little bit further to try and raise that capital. Like networking is a really important part of any business, and for me, it just takes that little bit extra work to try and make those connections.
And it sounds like you must have to do that on two different levels if you're having to make those connections to help you to help to build and grow the business. But you're going to have to make connections with the athletes as well, I'm sure. You're going to have to reach out, because if they're going to be the, not the product as such, but if that's your, you know, the gateway there that's going to bring people to the site. So networking sounds like it takes up, or should take up, quite a lot of your time.
It definitely does, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't know what kind of percentage to assign to it, but yeah, I spend an awful lot of time, and LinkedIn is a very, very useful tool. It's something actually that I've kind of noticed that a lot of athletes aren't on LinkedIn, and is one thing that we look to kind of change, just by every athlete we work with, strongly encouraging them to get onto LinkedIn and how to optimize it. But when it comes to engaging with the athletes, we were, you know, we always seen it as one of our biggest challenges. We started working with a company called Open Doors, which is a NIL, name, image, and likeness marketplace. So it's where you go if you want to get an athlete to, you know, represent your brand or create some content. We put an advert up, and the response to that really kind of blew us away. We ended up getting, I think it was over 1,700 applicants from athletes in the USA, and you're talking, some of them have, you know, followers in excess of 100,000, some of them 500,000, some of them obviously a lot lower, but some quite high profile athletes responded to our advert. So yeah, we were very fortunate, just the fact we got such a great response on that front.
Brilliant. And did that help to then build momentum in that college athlete community?
Yeah, definitely. Now, what we kind of realized, there was a lot of hunger from athletes for these opportunities. Now, you know, with this legislation being passed, it has opened up this huge opportunity for brands to jump in and start working with athletes. But there's a massive discrepancy between the top athletes and everyone else. Whereas your average deal by an athlete is actually $65, and usually that requires them to do some kind of promotion or turn their like Instagram into like an advertising board, which a lot of them don't want to do because it's personal to them. Whereas the news focuses on the superstars who are getting like Mercedes handed out to them and are worth like multiple millions. But that is like a fraction of a percentage, where there's this entire market of athletes who are really kind of scrapping to get a little bit of like, it's not even like to make them rich, it's just that supplementary income. And that's who we are kind of focused on. And I think our message really resonates with them. We also have certain kind of incentives for them to refer their teammates. So you will probably know, you know, having played in sports yourself, it's a very kind of tight knit kind of environment when you're playing team sports, even individual sports with a wider team. So there's no way that if I was in a team and I was earning money passively, that my teammates wouldn't find out about that. And we have seen that network effect already occurring within certain kind of sports environments.
Yeah, no, I can definitely relate to that. In fact, some of my friends used to joke that the only reason I moved clubs was to get a new pair of boots. So I can see where that endorsement comes from, definitely. So Callum, you're dealing with obviously raising funds through networking. You're having to obviously attract athletes to the site. You're finding yourself in different time zones around the world. So managing your own time, that must be a bit of a challenge. But what kind of tools or tips or tricks do you use to make sure that you stay on top of it?
Now, I think that is a great question because it is a constant challenge, and I'd be lying to say that I've mastered it yet. I mean, I think working with other people to keep you accountable is really beneficial. But yeah, I mean, I think any kind of routine, and that's probably the most difficult thing about traveling and being like a digital nomad without a kind of like a home base, I suppose, is it's very difficult to form your routine. I don't know if you've read the book Atomic Habits, but they talk about kind of associating tasks with certain things. So I would often do that. Like if there is a certain routine that I have, then I would place something that I need to do next to the thing that I know I'm going to do. So it might be like brushing your teeth every single morning. So I might leave myself a note, over by the toothbrush, and that's going to remind me straight away to do that. Or even if I go and exercise a certain time of day, I will then couple that with getting food and then checking my email. So yeah, kind of coupling tasks together so you kind of form a solid routine that way is good. But I do think primarily it's consistency. So having something that you can keep going back to, whether it is just a case of, having the same breakfast as every day or waking up at the same time every single day. These things in the long run really help with time management.
Brilliant, yeah. And obviously then you're having to then manage your own time, but that kind of, as you said, across the different time zones as well, and tying into that. So it must be a massive challenge that you've got there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I say, I'm kind of fortunate that I'm 12 hours ahead of Central Time, which is where one of my other co-founders are. So, I mean, I've missed quite a few calls getting the time zone wrong, but with my co-founder is excellent because it's whatever it is here, it's, PM here, AM there. It's quite hard to mess up. Yeah, I mean, it's okay. I work in the morning, work at night, and then during the day, I've got a little bit more time to kind of sort my own life out.
Brilliant. So having that co-founder based over there, obviously there's that's somebody that's on the ground, if you like, a bit more in the States and making those networks. But how did you come together? Was that again through the different networking, or where did you meet your co-founder?
So that was LinkedIn as well. Now I've got two co-founders. I met one on LinkedIn and then one at a conference I went to in Denver. Now, people often ask me how long I've been working on this, and my answer is 2.5 years. But then I also have to then say, but probably 6 months of that at least was me just trying to find co-founders, particularly when you're looking for a technical co-founder, because these are highly skilled individuals who could quite easily get a 6-figure salary working for Google or something. So you've got to find not just someone with the skill sets, but someone with the appetite to work in a startup, which is far higher risk, far higher reward, sure, in the long run. But when you have that kind of skill set, it's quite difficult to justify going into something that is with no guarantees. So I find my chief technical officer on LinkedIn, and I found my other co-founder who's got a background in sales and business development. As I say, at a conference, he was really kind of passionate about sports. He's a huge baseball fan. He's based in California. So yeah, he was eager to get involved, and eventually it grew, and I asked him if he wanted to come on board as a co-founder, and he agreed.
Do you know, I think for a lot of people, whether it's raising finance, finding somebody to support you in the business journey, or even just, starting to build the business up so that it becomes a kind of a self-perpetual, that momentum within the business, it's a really difficult period. And I'm sure if you're having to, use these different, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's conferences, when it's, cross time zones and different nationalities, must have been a bit of a challenging time for you, surely.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge learning curve, but I've never been one to shy away from a challenge, and I've always kind of felt that that imposter syndrome is a sign that you're moving in the right direction. So looking back at when I started, I kind of tend to laugh at myself about how little I knew, but it's okay because back then I accepted that I didn't know much. But you can always learn. I mean, no one is born knowing anything. Our entire life we're learning. So yeah, accept the fact that you are I suppose, ignorant to what you need to know and accept the fact that eventually you will learn it. And if there's like skills you don't possess, will you find someone else that has those skills? Now, I kind of say like the moment that someone else came on board, the business was no longer my own. As much as I came up with it and I'm the one that's really kind of driving it, or was the one driving it for so long, there's a team of people behind us now, and we're all kind of pushing towards the same goal.
Brilliant. And so getting through that difficult time, and I think what you've touched on there is obviously is your frame of mind that you've taken to it, and you've been open to learning more through it, but keeping yourself motivated through it. But there must have then come a point where you've had that breakthrough, and you think this is us onto the next level. So when did that come? What happened at that point?
Well, I find there's like certain kind of milestones or certain hurdles that when you overcome, you do feel like you're on to that next one. So like, as I say, that big one, that first one was finding someone to join the mission with you. And getting the athletes, that was another huge one. Then just forming certain kind of strategic partnerships, so getting people on your advisory board. I think the next big one for us will be like our funding round once we get that done. Shipping the product, the minimal viable product, that was a huge milestone as well. And there's obviously, with every peak, there's always troughs. As we always say, the lower the trough, the higher the peak. So again, you've just got to accept that. I think like people talk about burnout quite a lot, and like you can't avoid burnout. Like all you need to do is develop certain strategies in order to know that you'll come through it all right. Like as I say, exercising is really important. Having a good routine, having a good support network. Things like I've not drank in over 2.5 years now. That makes a huge difference. Just my kind of mental well-being, like meditation. In Scotland, I was doing like cold water exposure, things like that, really helped me. So yeah, I mean, I think you should always look in business to be the best version of yourself, because if you can't be the best version of yourself, how can you ever expect your business to be, reach its full potential?
Yeah, that's such a good bit of advice, such nice insight as well in terms of, and I think you as the business owner or the leader, turning up and putting in your best performance every day helps the business to move forward as well. And I like what you're saying about peaks and troughs. I try and keep the variance between the two as minimal as possible, but I do get that there's some real highs and some real lows on the journey. So definitely get that. Good. So the advice you've just given there, having a good routine, keeping yourself healthy, and you mentioned learning as well, just on that continuous learning journey as well while you're going through it. What's next for you in MVPs then? What's the next kind of hurdles that you're aiming for and going to have to learn to overcome?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I mean, I think once we start to scale up, that's when it's going to get really kind of challenging in terms of not really challenging. I mean, I think the challenges, the level of challenge is consistent, the types of challenge change. So, I've already got it in my head that eventually I will have to step down from my position as CEO. And that's a hard thing for a lot of founders to do, because they end up getting an emotional attachment to the business.
Mm.
But like, I'm aware there's a certain set of skills required to get your business off the ground, as it is to turn it into a corporation. So when we end up getting to that level, there's going to be someone better suited than me to take the business to the next level. However, the challenge I've got before that is starting to understand what kind of structure we need to then put in place in order to find the right talent and fit them in. So yeah, first hires, we've already done a few first hires, but again, you're probably looking for more generalists than specialists at this time, just because, I mean, we've got some specialists, of course, like a lead engineer, and all he does is just code and it's excellent. But someone who is maybe like, specializes in marketing, we might also require them to do other things, such as going into sales or business development. Like it's all hands on deck type thing. So understanding the natural kind of progression and evolution of a business, and understanding where certain roles are limited and where you need to get extra help. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge that I'm kind of looking towards in the near future.
Oh yeah, it's so relatable. There's an exercise that we do a lot of times where it's building that organizational chart, but it's the organizational chart in 5 years' time. So it's not who's in and around you now, but it's what are the roles that we will need when we get to that place, and how do we fill them? And it's such a good tool because it gives you that direction that you're aiming for, but it
Yeah,
also it allows the people around you to see the opportunities that are there, not, for them as well, if they're going to progress with the business. So yeah, it's a good thing to look forward down further down the line and think, what do we need? And but that leads to a different decision that you've got to make then, in terms of prioritizing who comes into the business at what point. How do you manage that?
yeah. I mean, again, I think a lot of it's kind of trial and error. So we have had people that have kind of came and went. So like everything is on a temporary basis. Like, you just got to be aware that pivots happen in business. You've got to expect unexpected. The amount of times I've wrote a business plan, scrapped it, and rewrote it is kind of, it's gotten to the point now where I have like a very kind of rough template, and then when it's required, that's when I'll start filling it in, because the circumstances change, like, and evolve in such a kind of rapid basis
Mm.
that you can plan for the future, but what matters is always what's that next step. And I always find myself doing that. Like I always find myself, like, I'm a forward thinker, so I'm always thinking about like the 5-year plan. But the hardest thing for me is to think about what's the next necessary step. Yeah, and often that is a case of who do we get in, what skill sets do we need, what's the kind of appropriate compensation for them, how can we incentivize them? Because I mean, even things like, it's easy to spend money in business, particularly if you're then looking to bring in talent. People will work for you if you pay them. But at this point in the business, you want someone with that extra motivation, who understands that the value they're going to get isn't the money in their hand straight away. It's the value in 5 years' time when we turn this into a huge business.
Yeah, and that's again, I think that comes back to you as the leader, doesn't it? And creating that vision, and being able to enroll and inspire the team into that, where it's, as you say, it's a longer term vision of the business. So a really nice bit of insight there as well, Calum. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So I suppose, you're looking for investment at the start and people to support your business. But if you were to go back to the start, and let's say I was just to hand you, that £100,000 from your friends and family, let's multiply that. Let's call it 1 million or five. Would you have went down the same journey, or how do you think the business journey might have changed?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's very kind of relevant to what I actually experienced. So we were looking to fundraise, and then like the market was great just after kind of lockdown, because we had all that stimulus and there was a lot of money floating about. But then they started to hike interest rates, and all of a sudden, the economy kind of crashed. People were a little bit more hesitant with investing, and we found it very difficult to raise money. And I think that was a blessing in disguise. Like, having spoke to other founders who raised earlier than us, they raised a ton of money, and they spent all that and made lots of mistakes, and now they're no longer in operation. So I think having lots of money at your disposal probably makes you more inclined to dispose of that money without getting the value for it. Whereas, yeah, I think you're a little bit more careful, particularly when it's your own money. We're still bootstrapped to this stage. So I justify every single penny that I spend. Really kind of think twice about whether or not it's going to add value to the business. Now, that being said, there's been an awful lot of things I've spent money on which I've got no value from, and I'm still kicking myself to this day. Whether it's £1,000 or a pound, it still hurts all the same.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a lesson that you've bought, though, isn't it? It's the other way
Yeah,
to
that's a
look at
good
it.
way of looking at it, for sure.
Yeah, okay. I like that. Brilliant. So, you've spoken as well about the routines that you've got to get you through the day and the week. How do you? Sorry, I'll come back to that, Calum. Just let me come back to that. Okay. Yeah. So you've spoken before about the routines, building a good routine into your day-to-day living so that you can be the best. So, where do you start when it comes to building routines?
I mean, I think probably you need to understand just the value of certain things. Like, there's a huge culture in kind of in the startup world of founders only getting like 5 hours sleep or 6 hours sleep, which I've heard this before, and I always tell them, like, get 8 hours sleep. I read a book which was really life changing. I'd recommend it to anyone, even people not in the business world, called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. Um, and he just kind of talks about the importance of sleep. Since getting 8 hours sleep now, and routines as well, so it's 8 hours sleep opportunity, I should say. So you end up only getting about 7 hours sleep there. Since doing that routine, so like if I go to bed at like midnight and I will wake up 8 o'clock bang on, that's had a huge impact on just my energy levels, on my how I can, my mood volatility as well, like my focus, and even other things such as like your health. So like your immune system lowers massively if you don't get enough sleep. So I would always say that is probably the number one thing. Like everything else you do is based upon that. It doesn't matter. You could be exercising and have a great exercise routine. You could have a great diet, but if you're not getting enough sleep, you're not benefiting from that enough. So find out what are the most fundamental things to your life. And I would always start with getting 8 hours sleep. From there, again, it's a case of, I mean, we all kind of know it. I think we all make excuses, don't we? We're like, oh, well, 2 glasses of wine at night doesn't, I'm not getting drunk and stuff, but it still has an impact. Or like, what's like, one kind of fish that we're going to do. That's fine, but then you start having it week on, week out, and then, you're working like till 10 at night, can't be bothered cooking. That's the third night in a row. And I do it as well. Like, I'm not perfect. Maybe I'm sitting here sounding like I've got this perfect life. Plenty of slip ups. I'm already considering a pizza tonight. Yeah, I mean, I think also the case with routine is like be forgiving of yourself. Like, we do slip up, but that doesn't mean throw the routine out the window. You know what I mean? It's like a smoker trying to quit and they have one cigarette and they think, well, that's me back on the smokes. It's like, no, just forgive yourself and then go off them again. So yeah, that's probably the advice I would give. Like, understand what's fundamental and start there, and then be forgiving of yourself when you slip up.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, and it's good to give yourself that little chance to just break the routine a little bit and the habits and indulge, I suppose, doesn't it? So very good. MVPs is obviously very technical, and I'm sure you'll be using already an element of AI in there as well. But how do you think that with the acceleration of these kind of software tools and things that people can utilize, how's it going to change the business for you, Cal?
I mean, it's already changed probably the business in more ways than I would be able to understand. Just like how efficient and productive I am as an individual due to ChatGPT is massive. Now, I would say that it's not, like, there's certain things that people don't pick up on. So like, it's very good at like confirming your own biases. Like, you should always ask for scrutiny with things like that. There's sometimes it's given me like answers that are just downright wrong, and then when I've called out on it, it's like apologized and corrected itself. So like, it's not like a magic fix. Like, you still need to be smart in order to use it, and you still need to I think maybe think twice about how valid the response is. But in terms of increasing productivity, if you get good at it, then it's really kind of hard to describe how much it's changing things. I mean, in terms of how it's going to change the wider kind of the wider economy, I think everyone's always scared about technology coming in and replacing jobs and making people jobless. But this has happened throughout time. Like, if you look at right at the start of the Industrial Revolution, all the agriculture went mad because it was replacing their jobs, and eventually it creates more jobs. The same thing happened with like the internet. Even like artists compared to graphic artists. Like, before, using something like Adobe was kind of considered like taboo, like it wasn't real art. But now no one would ever contest that digital art is actually art. So there are elements of these, and I think there's a lot of kind of fear mongering around it. But what I would tend to recommend people is just figure out how to make it work for you, rather than trying to like dwell too much on how it's going to impact wider society. because it's kind of terrifying as well.
You mentioned there that it's made you more productive. So
Yeah.
could you give us an example in terms of how has, utilizing ChatGPT or other AI, how has it made you more productive in your daily, weekly routines or efforts?
So research is a huge one, market research. Like I kind of find that using Google now is like I write something at Google and the top 3 responses are adverts and the next ones are all irrelevant. Whereas, just the response time from like ChatGPT is excellent. And if it gives me something that's irrelevant, I'll quickly correct it. And you don't have to think about like, what are the key phrases. You can actually do it in conversational format. So, they say that actually there's going to be like a pivot now. So those who are better with languages are going to excel more with artificial intelligence just because they can communicate effectively with it. So yeah, that's a huge one. Even things like developing strategies and documents. Now, I tend to still like to write things myself because I think having a personal tone in it is very important. But I would also, if it's maybe not as an important document, I would put it through ChatGPT. So something like an employment contract or a job description, something like that I would do through ChatGPT. But if it's like a blog, then I would write it myself because, again, like I think personality comes through style and that has a huge value.
Yeah, very good. No, I can see that, and it's interesting because there's a colleague of mine, and they use ChatGPT very frequently, and they've taught it to be able to write blogs in their style as well. So you can, you can feed it that information and become even more productive. So yeah, it's
Well, I
nice.
do
Very
have a
nice.
opinion that I will share with you. So, like, people are using it massively for content creation, particularly on text-based social media platforms such as X. But the one thing it lacks right now is the personality. However, anything with a pattern, it can replicate and do. So there's no reason to say that once AI advances enough that you won't be able to program your own personality into it, which is anyway, it's always curated. Like the version of you online is deeply curated for your audience. So you could technically, program AI to replicate your personality, create all of your content, and then post it. So eventually what we're going to get is, just AI bots talking to each other on social media and everyone else just consuming it. Because did they not say like 80% of the content on social media is produced by like 10% or 20% of the accounts, whereas most of us are just doom scrolling, taking in useless information. And eventually we'll just be reading AI bots have arguments about things.
Yeah, definitely. It's frightening waste of time for a lot of people. So yeah, very good. Calum, I've really enjoyed this conversation today. I think you've had some great insight to share. What's been some of the, just reflecting on this now, what do you think's been some of the best tips that you've had there that you've spoken through?
I think routine's a huge one. Just the idea of like making sure you're the best version of yourself. I mean, that should apply right the way across life, whether you're trying to form a business or you're just trying to be, a better human, and enjoy life more. Like just figure out what are the fundamental things to having a good life. Typically, they all revolve around your health. So I would say that. I think the other one as well is just like, don't be afraid of failure. Like I got into this knowing the odds of failure are huge, and they're still huge. It doesn't matter because like the risk involved pales insignificant compared to the sense of purpose that you get from it, and that for me is the biggest motivator.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for sharing that. If people want to find out more about yourself or to get involved in MVPs, how would they do it?
Yeah, so you can follow us on social media. We're predominantly on Instagram and X, so it's MVPZ_sport. We are also on LinkedIn, as I am on LinkedIn too. If you want to follow my personal accounts, and it's Calum_MVPZ. Again, X and Instagram. I'm kind of reluctantly on social media.
Yeah, that's definitely a generational thing. I'm the same, where it's your hand is forced to play in these markets as well. So completely get that. Calum, I've really enjoyed that. I will let you go because it must be near enough your bedtime soon. But thanks so much for coming on today and sharing your story and telling us a bit more about MVPs. And we wish you all the best for the future.
Excellent. Thank you very much for having me on. It's been really good talking.
Great. Speak soon. Thanks, Calum.